This is Tenet. You're listening to the final of a 3-part series with Denver artist Stevon Lucero. And now, Tenet.
So let's switch gears real quick here.
Okay.
Let's talk a little bit about the business end of things. You mentioned that at least at one time you had an agent. Do you still have an agent that represents you?
No. I had, when I first came on the scene here, I moved to Denver in 1976. And for 18 months, I didn't have a clue what to do. I was like just stuck in the mud. And my relationship with my first wife began to break down at that point. And we ended up splitting up. And I went through crisis. I call that my Woody Allen phase, where I didn't know what to do. And I had this painting. First guy who ever bought a painting for me was a guy named Pepe Mendez. He was a lawyer, very successful lawyer. And I had done a painting called Baba that he wanted really bad, and I refused to sell it. And out of desperation, I realized I needed the money, so I called him up and asked him to come over. I told him I'd be willing to sell the painting. So he came over, and we were talking, and I told him the situation. He says, maybe you need to talk to some other artists since you haven't met anybody here since you've been here. And I said, I'd like to. And he said, do you know Ramon Kelly? And I'd heard about him, and I knew he was a famous artist. But I thought, I have no way to contact him. He says, here, let me get you his phone number. So he called his office, got his number. So I called him up and asked him about coming over to see him, just to get a pointer, some direction. And I went over to his place and I saw this big old mansion. And it was like, you got to realize that here I was going through all this crisis, and all of a sudden I'm standing at this mansion. And they were so good to me. They were so nice. And his house was just fabulous. He had a famous painting by Nikolai Fechin in his little foyer there. And I saw it, and I just went, my mouth dropped open. I thought, oh my God, this guy's a class act. And he saw my work, and I saw that expression on his face. Because he had artists coming to him all the time, but it was routine stuff. When he saw that metarealism, he just kind of went, oh. And he says, you're doing something really different. So anyway, we had a conversation. He gave me a book, set me on my way. 2 days later, his wife called me, and she says, do you need a job? And I said, I certainly do. And she says, well, my brother has got this program running, and his name's Filiconio. So she had me contact him, and he hired me to be part of this thing called the Summer Youth Employment Program. This was in 78. This is when Carter had these programs going. And the first thing he did, and he was an incredible person, really helped me out. He started introducing me to artists. He introduced me to Manuel Martinez. Manuel Martinez was Ramon's brother-in-law. So he immediately introduced me to him. He introduced me to an artist named Ernie Gallegos, who is probably one of the best artists ever. This guy's a living Vermeer. He's brilliant. He's one of the best human beings I've ever known in my life. I mean, talking about just a spiritual, balanced human being. He's just, if you get around him, you like him. And he doesn't do anything. He's just real quiet, real unassuming. And I met him. I immediately was accepted by all these people. And then from there, it became a magical mystery tour. I just met one person after another and after another and after another. Anyway, this is the point is that during that first week, I had been working a temp job. I was working over Hirschfield Press. And I was sitting there during lunch, and I was still in the middle of my crisis. I was still kind of in a daze. And I was sitting there, and I looked across, and I saw this little redheaded guy with a beard, these little red rat eyes looking at me. And I thought, and it gave me the creeps. I said, who is this guy? Why is he looking at me like that? So I looked down, and then pretty soon he walked over to me, and he says, my wife left me 4 months ago. And I looked over at him, and he says, my wife left me 4 days ago. And then he introduced himself. Out of politeness, I said, oh, hi, how are you? Da-da-da-da. And then he says, what do you do? And I said, well, I'm an artist. He said, oh, can I see your art? And I didn't know what to do. I was desperate. I'm meeting all these people. So I was staying with a friend of mine, and I said, yeah, go ahead, come on over. And I had about 50 pieces over there. He came over next day or so, and he started looking through my art, and he flipped out. And he became really, animated and started talking a lot of stuff and saying that he knew all these people. And then that was it. He had to leave town, and that was it. I thought, I'll never see this guy again. A couple of months later, I was living over on 38th, and he shows up with this girlfriend he has. And he wants to be my agent. And then he proceeds to tell me that his father had been Joe Torre's godfather to his children. And so through him, he knew all of these big shots in the New York Yankees and that whole world, that whole thing. Plus, he knew celebrities, and he knew all these people over a place called Toad's Place, which is right off the Yale campus. And it's a very famous rock and roll club. And he said that he could get me shows back in Connecticut, New Haven, Connecticut. And I said, well, if you can do it, The next thing I know, he got me a show at Yale, and then one at Harvard, then one at Columbia University, and he started getting me shows. He started taking me out to Connecticut, and we would go to New York, and he started selling art for me, and he was getting big bucks, like for a little 8x10 that I would sell for $50, he was selling for $325. He was getting money for him, and I was like really shocked. And he just started moving things along, just hard and heavy. He got articles printed about me. He even got one of my pieces in the New York Times. And he was a real go-getter. And he was really aggressive. He was one of these guys. He was like a bull. He'd walk into a place and he'd say, I'm telling you, I got the best. And he would just scare you because you don't know if he was a gangster or not. He just had that aggressiveness. And so during that time, he started doing that in the East Coast. Meanwhile, here in Denver, we did a show over at St. Francis that had just opened up. And right from the onset, when they came down, the newspaper came down to talk about the show, they put one of my pieces in the newspaper. So for some strange reason, I started getting PR right away. Things appeared in the newspaper, articles appear, and I get quoted. And at one point, it just... people seem to go, and meanwhile, I was neurotic as hell. I was putting on my Woody Allen mask, and I would wear these green military jackets. My hair was all funny. I wore black horn-rimmed glasses, and I'd act stupid because I didn't know how to deal with this attention. Because here I was going through the trauma of divorce, and Nancy left town with my daughter. I didn't know where she was at. That took the trauma to another level. And meanwhile, all this energy is going on around me. And then meanwhile, Amendola is starting to get things moving for me back east. And it was really overwhelming. For a couple of years there, I was getting all this attention. And it was like one of those movies where an artist is discovered and all of a sudden they start getting their attention. And I saw it unfolding. And it scared the hell out of me. Like, if this continues, I'll be dead pretty soon. And the other thing is when I went back east, which was interesting, because all of a sudden, like I said, it had its entourage. I'd go and I'd be with Tony and his girlfriend, and the next thing you know, there's all these people and they were all around. It was crazy, and everybody was coked out. This is in the 80s. This was about in early 80s. 42nd Avenue was crack city. Now, if you go there, it's Disneyland. It's all lights and pretty and clean and everything. When I was there, we drove down. You drove down with your doors locked because there was crackheads in every the corners and people laying in the streets, and it was bad news. And everywhere I went, I mean, literally, I went to one guy's house. He was a cop. He was getting ready to go to work, get his uniform out there, and then he comes out of the bedroom with a mirror and a pile of cocaine, and he's offering it to us. And I was freaked out because I didn't like cocaine. My vice, the one vice I always had was I was a smoker. I like pot, and because I could work on it, I could work and work and work. It didn't bother me. But all these people were just coking out to the max everywhere you went. Hey, you want a line? I got to hit a line. And so what I would do is I would find myself a corner and I would sit and I would draw or paint to disconnect because there was all this activity. And it was like one of those 70s movies you see where everybody's partying and people are glittered out and people are that whole Andy Warhol type scene, except on a smaller scale. And I kept thinking, I feel like I'm like an angel who's gone to hell to try to sell ice cream. I just, it can't, I couldn't really deal with it. And so at a certain point, I basically told Tony, that I just wanted to lay off for a while. And then eventually he moved in separate directions. He ended up moving to Florida. Oh, I remember what happened. I told him we were going to move to the mountains. And Arlette and I moved to her parents. She had a cabin in the mountains. And we went and lived there for 2 years. And it was the way I shut everything off. I just basically disconnected. I broke away from the Denver scene. I broke away from the New York scene. And we went and lived in the cabin. I used that excuse because, there was no telephone there. And, the only thing we had was electricity. And we just basically shut ourselves off. And that was the best 2 years we ever had. It was great. And I just sat there and I studied the Uraji book, and I was trying to sort this all out, because it was just, like I said, it was moving too fast. And meanwhile, Tony Shear and I, the dialogue between Tony Shear and I was incredibly intense at that point. He'd come on and spend a lot of time with us, and I was really distracted by the whole spirituality thing of it. So, like I said, that was my excuse to basically say to Tony, well, we're going to go live here. So I only had occasional communications with him. I said, well, won't be into town until such and such. So he'd have to contact me when I was in town. When we'd spend a couple nights at Arlette's folks. And gradually we drifted apart. Then I met another partner of his, a guy named Victor, who became my agent after that. And Victor was determined to do it. And Victor took it to a whole nother level. And tell you one of the stories that happened with Tony. Tony had given a print. We did these prints of Rainbow Boy. It was a limited edition print. And he'd given a print to this lawyer named Riccio. He was a Bronx lawyer. And I was going to go, and this Riccio wanted to meet me. Tony thought he was important, and I had no idea who this guy was. So he took me to this little office in the Bronx. It was close to where those, you see that in the movies, that railway that's above ground. They used it in French Connection. Well, that runs through the Bronx. So his office was right by that. So we go over there, and he's got this white suit on, and he's all flamboyant, and he says he has an office down on Wall Street, and he's going on, and first he says, do you know who Mario Cuomo is? I ain't never heard of him. And I said, no. He says, well, he's a friend of mine. We're making him governor next month. I looked at him and I go, okay. Next month, Mario Cuomo became governor of New York State. And he said, we are making him governor. He meant that like him and some friends of his were doing this. And, I don't, and like I said, I was just going in one ear to the other. And apparently what had happened is Tony had given him that poster, that print, and he made a big deal out of it. And it wasn't any big deal. It was a cheap little print. And he took us to this school that he said that he was one of the guardians for. And it was an old school in the Bronx. In the playground, there was like these teepees. And the teepees had been there for so long, they were covered in a cement-like soot from the pollution of the city that looked like they were made out of concrete. And he said inside that building were Indian artifacts. This guy was a nut about Indians. And he was excited about me because he thought I was an Indian. So he took us there and he said that they were going to build a museum and they were going to put all this stuff in there. Years and years later, they built this big museum there, and all the stuff that went from that school went there, because on the news they said the artifacts, and they showed the building, and that was the building he took us to. All those artifacts that were in there, that whole school from top to bottom was filled with Indian artifacts, and all those things are now in that museum. And he said he was the guardian of all that. So anyway, he took us to lunch at this little restaurant in the Bronx. And it was a little tiny place. It wasn't real big, maybe the size of these two little rooms here combined. And when we went to the front door, this big guy moved in front of me and said, deliveries are in the back. And I said, I'm with them. And he says, what? And then they came back and said, no, he's with us. And this guy had a little towel wrapped around his arm, and he was all tall, and he has all white thing. He looked all tuxedoed out. And so he took us in this little restaurant, really, one of these places with the real nice tables with the big plates and really, high class. And it was small. And I looked around, and the whole place was filled with these old Italian men. They were all old guys. And we sat at a table, and the maitre d' comes over, and they're hooing and hawing and whatever. And he orders us some sort of veal dish. They brought this big plate with this little tiny bit of food on it. And I thought, oh, that's just nothing. This ain't gonna feed me. And I started to eat it, and it was absolutely luscious. The food was unbelievably delicious. And I kept just taking little bites because it was so good. And I thought, wow, what is this? And I could barely finish it. It was like it like grew in my stomach or something. I don't know. But I was sitting there and I was thinking, wow, this is fantastic. And then the guy comes around with this little plate, and he's got all these big cigars in it, like these big round cigars, like it was these huge cigars, and he lights them up and everything, and everybody's smoking a cigar, and Verricchio's ranting about the food, and then the chef comes out, and Verricchio gives him a $20 tip, and then he goes, and then he gets up and says, here, I want you to meet some of my friends. And he took me to every single table in that restaurant and introduced me to every single one of those old guys, and they were all smoking cigars, and they were all looking at me like, what's this spick doing in here? It's like they were just, you could just see the look in their eye like, what are you, I'm not going to shake this guy's head. But they did it. They all shook my head. And I'm sitting there going, this is really strange. What is going on? And like I said, they were all old guys, guys in their 60s, 70s, 80s. And we go over, sat down, finished our lunch, paid a $200 check for the meal. Went back to his office. Then his other guy pulls up in a big turquoise limousine with his daughter, and Verricchio's talking to him, and he says, "Yeah, I had a little painting with me." He says, "What do you want for that?" And I says, $100. And he gave me a $100 bill, and then he turned around and gave the painting to that guy, and the guy thanked him, and he left. So as the guy left, he goes, "You see that guy? He's worth $50 million." And I go, "Oh." And he says, "Yeah." He says, "You know how he got his money?" And I said, "No." And he says, "Cement." Now, I didn't know that was code. That meant he was a made man. Right. Okay. And Tony told me that later, because I'm kind of like, cement, okay. You make cement, And so he continued to talk with me, and then we left. It turns out those were all mafia bosses. That whole place.
All mob bosses.
They were all mob bosses. They were the big guys of the Bronx. And Verricchio was one of the hotshot lawyers of the mob. And they were the ones who put Verricchio or Cuomo in office. And his son as well. I mean, so anyway, later I found out Verricchio was good friends with Victor, because at that time I was with Tony. But later, as I met Victor, I realized that Victor was the connect. Victor knew all these people. Victor had an uncle who was in the mob. And he took me to all the places where all the mobsters had been killed. Yeah. He took me. I got to meet the guy who used to ride with Joe Veracci. The guy who wrote the Veracci papers, Joe Veracci. Yeah. I met his partner when they were hitmen. He was an old man. He's an old man. And his son controlled part of Mulberry Street. Mm-hmm. Mulberry, right there in Little Italy, in a village. Have you ever been to New York?
No.
Okay, in New York, in the village, the safest place in New York, or it used to be, I don't know what it is now, but then, this is the 80s, the safest place in New York was the village, and Little Italy and Chinatown are like adjacent to each other. Little Italy's here and Chinatown's here. And the mob controls all of that area. So you don't see police. There's no police. They have their little guys on the corners. And they keep the peace. And every night in Manhattan and in the Village, it fills up with tons of people. And all these little tiny restaurants, they have lines and lines of people. They have the best food in the world in that area. I mean, any place you go and eat is just, the food's fabulous. And every kind of cuisine you can think of. And at that time, John Gotti was running New York. And right there where Victor lived, right catty corner, was that club where the mobsters would meet. And I remember once I had my camera and I was saying, and the door was open, and we were walking by, and I said, I'm going to get a picture. And Victor just got hysterical because all of these fancy cars were parked in front. And I pulled my camera out, and Victor says, no. And he ran away. And if you knew this guy, because he's a big, thick guy, and he just ran away like a rabbit. Because it's like, no, you take a picture, you're dead man. So I thought, no, I better not take a picture. So I didn't. But you could see in there. You could see into and it looks like a little pool hall. It's just a little dumpy place. And I think we saw the one they used to call the one that used to wear the bathrobe and wander around on the streets, the Chin. And then I met, and one of the things was one of these guys, he was a good looking guy. He looked like kind of a young Jerry Lewis, really nice clothes. I mean, his jacket, you could tell these guys were spiffed up. And we walked by him, and he looked such a normal, nice guy. And then he was yelling at some guy to somebody screwed up over here. And he was right out of the movies. With the slang, and tell that guy, and he was just laying it out on this guy, and it was like, whoa, that's pure movie dialogue stuff, you know. And Victor was really enamored with that whole Godfather reality, you know. And I was like terrified of it, you know. But I met tons of these guys, and I'd go into these places, and he'd introduce me, and they'd walk up to me and give me a big kiss, and I would think, I would think like, oh God, I'm gonna die, and they would start laughing because they knew that I that's what I was thinking, you know. Right. I saw Cruise. These, you know, like they talk about in the movies, like you go to these pizza joints and then there's this little dark lit room. I went into this one place to use the bathroom, and I had to go through this little back way. And as I looked back there, I saw these guys sitting on a table playing with cards. And I looked and I said to Victor, I said, is that a crew? He said, oh yeah, they're just waiting for the next job. It's like, God, that was weird. That was really weird. So the first time around, I was seeing all the cocaine heads. The second time around, I would kept meeting gangsters and stuff, and they were all very polite, and they looked like just regular Joes. You know, they're just they're all usually overweight. The Sopranos pretty much hit it on the head. Sopranos is very
accurate.
Very accurate. Yeah.
Even the mob said that. Yeah. The New Jersey mob said it was like an inside, somebody was selling them. But that's how real it was. You
go to some of their houses in the suburbs, and it just looks like middle-class America.
Yeah.
And then you go to the garage, and there's a ton of weed in the garage waiting to be distributed. I mean, rooms filled this big, filled with weed and stuff. And he just, okay. And we were there to take a guy a print, you know. It's like, all right. So that was an interesting period. But
that must have been really interesting.
It was also a little scary. Although Victor himself was never really involved. When he was a young man, he said he wanted to join. And so they put him through one of their tests, and he realized he didn't want to do it. Because at some point he would have had to kill somebody, and he didn't want to do it.
Yeah.
He did do something for him, and they ended up sending him. They have a system where if you do something, they have these enclaves in Cuba, and they send you to Cuba, and the family takes care of you in Cuba for a period of time. And meanwhile, they take care of your family in the States until you're whatever you're hot for clears, and then they bring you back. And that puts you up on the ladder rung in terms of personal rep. That's how they do it. But they have all these little towns throughout Cuba they support those families, and the families take care of their hideaways, I guess. You learn all that stuff. So. And you learn that business is done in the East, not in business halls, not when they put bids out and stuff like that. That's not where it's done. It's done in the street. It's done in the intersections, like these guys in t-shirts and stuff like that, all divvying up their cuts and making sure that this goes this and this goes there, but it's all set up to look like legitimate process.
Right.
They're slick. As like I said, the Sopranos hit it pretty much on the head.
So do you have any galleries that represent you?
Not now.
No.
Not now. I had a Santa Fe gallery, and I've had some people want me to get involved with stuff, and some guys want to start up another co-op. I just don't want to do it at this point. If a gallery with a reputation came along and kind of gave me a deal like what they did with Ramon, then I'd be willing to do it. But not if they dictate what they want me to do, because a lot of them will say, do more of these and more of that, Ramon, last time I saw Ramon, he told me that, I said, well, how are you doing? And he says, I'm doing all right. He says, I'm doing good. He says, still doing good. You always did good. And he says, but now I just have one gallery that covers me. He had a lot of different galleries and stuff. He was spread all over. He says, now I just have, and they distribute his work all over the world. And so, and he pays them a real high percentage. He says, but they get such good prices for him, and they distribute, they do so much business for him. Plus they, see, one of the things in business is that everything's expensive. Like you got to advertise, because advertising puts your name out there, because everything's name recognition. Okay. It doesn't matter if you're good or bad, just as long as you're always out there, people always see it. So to do that, you got to buy a lot of ads in magazines, and the best are the ones that are full page ads. And a full page ad is going to run you anywhere from $3,000 to $10,000. We did one in Art in America, and it cost Tony, $3,500. And so, and if you're going to make good money, you got to be in several magazines, and you got to have a lot of those ads out. And the company that's promoting Ramon, they do. And the more high class the magazine, the more expensive the ads are. And plus, then they also publish these books for him. And his last book that I saw, it was like $150 for a copy. It was really nice. It was a nice book. So it's one of those things you got to, it takes money to make money. Now in the galleries, it used to be that the ideal was a gallery promotes you. The deal was you bring your art to the gallery. They put you up. They take a percentage. It used to be a third. Then it went to 40%. Then it went to 45%, and then it went to 50%. Now some galleries take 60%. Part of what they did is they advertise you. They don't just give you wall space. They advertise you. They promote you. They put money into you. Then they also finance an opening. And openings can get really expensive. That was the deal. That's not the deal anymore. The deal anymore is like you rent the space, you rent the place, you pay. Well, the last time I was checking it out, which was years ago, the average ongoing rental to rent a gallery to do a show was anywhere from $1,200 to $1,500. Then you had to pay for your own opening. You had to pay for all your own written, your published PR, printing, invitations, all that stuff. See, they used to do that. They don't anymore. You do it. And then the other thing is, and then after you've sold, they still take 60%.
Wow.
So unless you're an independently successful artist and you've got a really good deal with somebody, and to do that, you have to be famous. You have to already be there. You can't be an up-and-climber. We did a show at Jacob Javits back in late about 98 or something like that. I did that was a really interesting experience because Victor rented a booth, cost him a lot of money. They sent out 50,000 prints of that, postcards all over the world. It was for an art expo It was really a high class thing. I don't know how many booths they had there. In fact, right across from my booth was Stanley Mouse. Remember Mouse and Kelly, the guys who used to do the psychedelic posters?
All the 60s bands.
I got to meet him. I mean, he's a sweet guy. He's a really nice guy. He's telling me, he says, I had to get a new liver. I had to get an operation for my liver. I almost died. He says, when I was in the hospital room and they had me recuperating, all these people come in to see me, but they couldn't see the little angels. I said, what? And he says, yeah, he says, my room was filled with all these little 2-inch angels. And they were flying all around the room. He says, they were flirting with me and they were real sweet. He says, I really liked them. And I go, okay, and he was, and then he showed, and it was really funny because here's this guy, one of the most psychedelic artists in the world. Just a sweet, down-to-earth he's a little peasant guy. He's just, just a normal guy. Nothing weird about him at all, except the little angel thing. But he said, you want to see my important work? Stuff that I think is, this is the real me? And I said, yeah, sure. And he had this little book, little leather-bound book. He carried it in his inside pocket. And it was his private little book. And he took it out and showed me. And they were little portraits. They were little traditional paintings. As normal and as commonplace as could see. There was nothing hippie or psychedelic or new age or anything about it. It was just simple, traditional portraits of watercolors of his children and people that he knew. Just little portraits, little faces, little yard sketches and stuff. Just simple, almost amateurish looking drawings. And I just looked at him and I thought, oh Lord, and he got really pissed off because the woman that was his agent, she didn't like him talking to me because we got into talking about things and we were having a great conversation and she just abruptly, you got to go over here and got to sign these things, and he hated it. He felt he was so miserable. He didn't want to do all of the PR stuff. He didn't like the fame. That's the other thing. One of those side things that happens with an artist, being an artist, is you meet other artists and that have gone through all this stuff. You're like war veterans. And then you start letting that personal stuff out. And it's also basic. It's also real. And they'll share that with you. They open up to it right away because they can't get it from other people. Because that woman, all she was, I'm your agent and you're going to be here and you got to sign autographs and you got to make this money, you got to make this money, you got to make, it was all scheduled here, there. And he poor guy was like in a cage. He was like, he gave me this sad look like, because he was enjoying just talking to another artist who understood art, who did that. Because I was commenting on his work. I was giving him, because I know painting, no matter what kind it is. And so it didn't bother me what he was doing. It's like a guy who was going to, this is not my interest. No. I learned that from Ramon. I learned that it doesn't matter what the style is or what it is. It's what matters is you can see into like this one guy, a friend of de Kooning. I met a guy who had been part of de Kooning's inner circle. And he said, all artists, if you're a real artist, you can see the mind of the other artist when you look at his work. His work he was an abstract painter, but oh man, his stuff was good. But he was content too. He knew de Kooning, he was one of de Kooning's best friends. But that's the thing that artists share. Whether you're famous or not, that doesn't matter. What matters is that you know this process. And that's what links you. And that's the other thing about it, the process. It's a solitary thing. It's just you. And so when you share it with another artist, that's what you're doing.
You immediately have that connection.
Yeah, you immediately have that connection. So,
and it doesn't matter what medium they work in.
No, and that's what I'm saying. And if you really know your stuff, you can talk about any style, any tradition. I can talk to an abstract painter. There was a kid that I met back east. I kind of felt sorry for him because the kid was really sincere. He was really good. He did really big pieces. He would do them on acrylic and he'd roll them up, but he couldn't sell them. But they were good works. They were good things. But he didn't have a clue what he was doing. He didn't understand his own symbology. He was just in such a rush to become famous and stuff, and he was just slapping his stuff down. And I looked at his work, and I could see what he was doing. And I started to, because he laid out a bunch of these canvases for me, and I said, "Well, yeah, look here," and it's like I revealed his symbology. There it was. And I didn't understand why he didn't know it. But when I explained it to him, he went, "Oh, that's what I'm doing." And then he got all, because at first he was real enamored, or not enamored, but very reluctant and I don't know, who's this guy? I'm an artist, He had that arrogance, like, don't talk to me about art. I know everything, And he's looking at me like, and I get this a lot. Who's this Mexican? You always see that in their eye. I didn't say anything. I just said, "Okay, let's see what you got." And when I started to explain it to him, and I started to show him what he was doing, all of a sudden he wanted to start calling his stuff Metarealism. He wanted to, it's like he had a grasp of what it was that he was struggling with. It's almost like if I was like a psychoanalyst who basically showed him where his neurosis was, or what his neurosis was. And what I didn't understand is, why didn't you already know this? And the only reason you didn't know it is because your ego is just in the way.
Right.
Put that aside and look at what you're doing, and you'll see it, because it's there. And that's the other thing, when I go to a museum, and here I am, it sounds like I'm bragging about myself. I get into trouble because I'll be looking at some artists that I really like, and I'll go up, how they put the little bars, the little thing in front of the picture so you can't get close to it. I'll step over it, and I'll put my eye about 1 or 2 inches away from it, and the guards just get freaked out, like they're ready to tackle me, but what I do that because when I get up close to the canvas, I can read everything. I can read how fast he was painting. I can read the materials he's using. I can almost tell what kind of brushes he's using, whether he's using rounds or he's using flats, or how thin he was doing it, what his medium was, what his primer was that he used on his canvas before he stretched it, if he stretched it. You can read the tension in the artist, in the way that he's painting, the way the brush moves on the surface. Like I tell young people, they'll look at the Aztec work and they'll look at the line work and say, "How do you get that smooth line?" And then they'll show me what they're doing. And I said, "You know what the problem is?" And I said, "What?" I says, "You're thinking about it. You sit here, and every time you go, well, here, and you stop, your mind interrupts it, and so you start again, and it doesn't do exactly the same thing. What you do is you eliminate the thought, and you just make a single stroke, and don't think about it. Don't worry about whether it's going to be online or not. Just do that, and clear the mind of the thought, because every thought interferes, because you see every thought is in the stroke." And, and I remember talking to a couple of kids like that, and when they saw it, all of a sudden they go, "Oh, that's simple." It is simple. And that's the way most things are when you do them, when you've done them over and over and over again. Your brain sets up the circuitry, and you just read it and you do it, and you don't think about it. And the less you think about it, the better it'll look. So I get a kick out of doing that, and it makes those guards go nuts. I almost got tackled a couple of times.
So how do you sell your art? Is it mostly from online at this point? Do you have a number of collectors? Do you sell a lot of prints?
Well, I sell a lot of prints. Wherever I take the prints, I usually sell. But they're pretty cheap. I've never raised the price on them. I keep them between the $10 and $20 range. When I was aggressively selling art, it was more or less just, it sold itself wherever. Because I was always doing shows. That was one of the things that up until recently, I was always showing somewhere. In fact, I remember one September, I did 8 shows simultaneously. So I had something like 120 canvases out, spread all over in 8 different locations in just 1 month. And it's funny because you meet artists all the time who say, oh, like Frida Kahlo, she painted for years and years and years and then finally got one show. Since the very beginning, I've had luck in doing shows. I mean, when I was a student at the University of Wyoming, they built a new art department and they built this really nice gallery for art student shows. And I was the first guy who showed. You talk about the first. I keep doing these firsts because I was in that thing that was called the 123 Gallery. And now that building's already been destroyed. It's like they've already replaced it with another one. But back then, this was in 73, I think, 72. And I called it The Madman in Mainly Blue. And that piece on the Madman, that was the main painting of the whole show. I did that was back then. And so how I got that, I don't know, because I was still a student. I wasn't even a junior at that point. I think I was a sophomore. So I've always, for some reason, been lucky at getting shows. And from the very onset. And like I said, when I first came on the scene, that very first show we did at St. Francis Center, that's the first time I did any group shows with any other Chicano artists or any other artists in general. And boom, right off the bat, they put my piece in the newspaper, and they did a nice, fairly large shot of it. And I've just always been fortunate that way, and I don't know why. But at the same time, I've never been able to use it for sales. I mean, my work has been used in movies, it's been used in documentaries, it's been used in album covers. There's a guy in New Zealand that put one of my images on covers. Got some guys in Canada, some local guys, at least a half a dozen or more images have been used for album covers. And never have I been able to get a response, a return from any kind of, public. Even when I did that mural for the Natural History Museum back in '92, I did that diorama. Mm-hmm. Everybody kept coming to me and saying, "Oh," because I was in every newspaper in the state. They had my pictures all over the place. They had the mural. It was the biggest diorama for the exhibit. There was just all this PR all over the place. I even made Omni magazine. There was a blurb about it in Omni magazine. And this one gallery said, "Oh, we want to do a show. You're going to be famous, and do this." And even Manuel came and said, "Well, I got to do a show over here in the foothills. Could you do it with me?" Because he wanted to piggyback on my publicity. And when it was all over, nothing. I never received but maybe one or two sales directly linked to that show. And those sales were paintings that were studies for the big mural. And I went ahead and I framed them up, and there was one really good one, and those sold. And I think there was only 3 or 4 of those. Outside of that, nothing else. And even one show that even PR'd me as the artist doing the thing, and they made a big deal out of it, and they did PR and everything. They did it, and they did a real nice show. They never sold anything. So it's always been, and I've never understood that. Because other artists that would get a picture in a newspaper, somebody would go and buy that painting or print piece, whatever. But people never responded to any PR. When we were first putting together Chalk, we did a thing for, Don Cardenas used to be a producer over at Channel 6. And he put together a show called Cultures in Focus. And Steve Allen was the host. And what they did was they showed a series of films that were made by ethnic directors. One from India, one from Mexico, and so on and so on. And that's why it was called Cultures in Focus. And they wanted us to put up paintings for the set so that Steve Allen could introduce the movies, which we did over at the stations at Channel 6. So we got to meet Steve Allen and the whole bit. And they took 2 of my pieces, Blue Smoke Woman, and they took Rainbow Boy, that piece up there on the wall. They took that one, and they put that up, and they had Blue Smoke Woman. Or the first one they had was Rainbow Boy, and then they had Blue Smoke Woman. And Steve Allen even walked up to Rainbow Boy and talked about it. And that went on national TV. And he said, Rainbow Boy represents the diversity of things and da-da-da-da, da-da-da-da. And I think he even named me in it. I wasn't Stevon at that time. I was Steve. That's another thing. See, Stevon is a story behind that. But anyway, I was sure I was going to get a response out of that. Nothing. The Stevon, by the way, is it's kind of an interesting story. When I came on the scene, I've always gone by Steve. I had a friend who wrote a poem that I put away, and he calls me Stevon in it. And I said, why do you write that? He said, well, it's a fusion of the Spanish and English. I said, oh, cool. I said, well, I'm a synthesis. That's, pretty much what it is. And so it was just between us. Well, when I came on the scene here, I was Stevon Lucero. Well, the next thing I know, I'm starting to get these nasty phone calls from women who've been stood up by Stevon Lucero, who they had a date with. And I would say, no, I don't know you. I never met you. Who are you? And they'd tell me where we met, and I'd say, I've never been there. I says, I'm an artist. He said, well, you said you were an artist. Well, I'm short, and I'm stocky, and I'm dark. Yeah, that's you. And I go, I don't know who you're talking about, And I even met one girl at the Cosmopolitan who came up to me all pissed off because I stood her up for a date. She was pretty. I don't know. I never met her before. And she insisted that I was the guy who did it. And I thought, oh my God, have I gone schizophrenic or what? What's going on? Well, it turns out that there was another Stevon Lucero who was short, dark. I think he was taller than me, but basically my same body type. I think he married Nita Gonzalez, but I'm not sure. I'd never had that confirmed. But this guy was using my PR, because I told you every time I did anything, I was getting PR in the newspaper. And he would set up a show near where I was having a show, and he would piggyback on my publicity to get people to go to his show to see his art.
And everybody was buying his art.
So I don't know. And I heard later that I kept thinking, what? And finally, and there was one gal, I had an extensive conversation with her. And then finally she says, no, maybe you're not. Then she wanted to have a date with me. Because she likes me. She said, you're far more interesting than the other guy. I just, at that point, I was kind of like, this is crazy. I got to do something. And then I happened to run across that poem. And I decided to start using the word Stevon. And I was going to do it just temporarily until people separated us. And that somebody told me later that guy was dating Nita Gonzalez and that he married her. But then again, I never heard anything about that. And I think that Nita split up with him. I'm not sure. I don't know what her gig is. But so years later, as time passed, I didn't hear about this guy anymore. The name didn't pop up. I didn't get any more references to him. So I thought, well, I'm going to go back to my name. And I was talking to Ramon, and I said, people have gotten to know me as Stevon. He says, no, just keep Stevon. He says, it's a good artist name. And I said, oh, okay. So I've stayed Stevon. So, but it was like I said, I still would like to know who that guy was and how he was able to do that. Because I remember I said to somebody, they said, I went to your show over da-da-da-da. And I says, I didn't have a show over there. What are you talking about? Yeah, Stevon Lucero. You weren't there, but and then they saw my work and said, oh no, that's not your work. It's different work. It's different art. And I thought, so, but he was, like I said, he was showing, like if I was showing at one place a block or two, he'd be showing someplace. This guy would be showing someplace else. And how he did that or how he arranged it, I don't have a clue. I don't know. So there's always been something strange going on with me. So
that's pretty interesting. Well, hey, I think we probably should wrap this up.
Okay.
But before we go, Would you mind reading one more poem from your book, Lyric Meditations?
Okay. Which one?
How about the sleeper poem?
Oh, Sleeper's Dilemma. Okay.
Yeah, Sleeper's Dilemma.
Okay, Sleeper's Dilemma. The sleeper's dilemma was his own, as it was hers, and all those who sleep to knowing vision. To see it only as dream, thus creating the need for more sleep. While vision, in this dream, built nations, civilizations, worlds within worlds, all to be plagued by a nightmare who called itself truth. That said, this is but a dream. So wake. Wake if you dare. Dare to wake. Dare to know truth. But before you dare, remember, when you wake, there can be no dream. I have a request.
Sure.
Maybe I think this might be a nice closer. It's kind of a long one, but I really like it. And I think it's very ethnic oriented, okay? So I don't know how your audience would respond to this, but it's something I think of in terms of this is for the people. And it's called Spick. Can I go ahead?
Absolutely.
Okay. Spick. Stepping into the twilight of a setting sun, a young Chicano's journey has just begun. From the shadows across the street, he hears a voice from a car in the early evening heat. Hey, Spick! Startled, he turns to face this voice of hate, which will call him to the door of fate. This voice of iniquity, which ever serves the delusion of superiority, makes him hide his fear and clench his fists. With the enemy so near, he gets ready to fight, when suddenly they start their car and tear off in fright. Quickly the cowards flee, leaving their hate on the shoulders of one who's free, leaving their hate upon another whose skin is brown, but is still their brother, leaving their unresolved hate on the shoulders of another, always another. But there is no other, only one, from the beginning to the end. And all this, is this the end? Or will the war wage forever? A silent tear flows down a cold Chicano's cheek. I want to dance. I want to sing. I want to be. But they won't let me. They, them, those other people, those others. But he thinks there is no other. There is only one. One from the beginning. The beginning to the beginning of the end. As darkness descends, a voice whispers softly in his ear, give it to the Lord, give it to Christ. Turning to face the cool whisper, the voice became an ancient flute, playing, praying, an ancient love song that sang of the beginning and of the now. And there before him in the darkness was a door, and he stepped in, he stepped out, which distracted him momentarily until he realized that he was there in the beginning with his ancestors. We have waited for you a very long time, although you have yet to be born. These were the first voiceless words he heard as this new reality became more than mere reality. Surprised yet unafraid, the young uninvited guest stepped into a room filled with love in the shape of men. With still lips they spoke with thoughts made of light, with their minds made of light. We have been waiting for your return. My return, he said? Yes. My return? Where was I? He asked. In the future. Then who am I? You are us, one of us. You are us. You are our return. Your what? Your return. Calmer, but in a quiet passion. Please, I don't understand this whole thing. It's crazy. It makes no sense. What does this all mean? What do you mean I am you? Yes, you are our return. You see, you are all, what you are is only half, and we are your other half. You have been taught to put us aside, to justify our sacrifice. Our sacrifice saved the world. Our sacrifice was for God. In our death, he came to a dying world, a world that was dying, for the Lord's curse was upon them for desecrating his son. They perpetuated the destruction of the Lord's word while doing all these evil things in his name. Even so, you too are the children of God, wayward and lost in their lust of things, possessions of the material world, the world of illusions which make themselves real in the blood of the innocent, of the children. But even so, they too are the children of God. Angered, the Creator demanded atonement. Yes, he demanded atonement, and we in our innocence became that atonement. Atonement through sacrifice. Flesh must be overcome. Atonement for the wall of the self that was put between us and the Creator. Atonement for the love we forgot to give each other. As for ourselves, as close as we are to the one, to the Lord, we too were falling into corruption. So it was necessary to offer ourselves up in sacrifice, to let the body die so that the spirit would live, so that the new body could be born, a new body, with strengths to come with new blood. For racial incest will weaken any nation, no matter how proud or self-assured. For vanity is not the power to assure survival. You, young son, are that new body. We are the other half, the part of you that lives in your dreams, in your aspirations, in your future. You are our assurance of the future as we are yours. We are the magic in your blood. We are the other half that makes you whole, that makes you one. Learn. When the eyes see as one, the body will be filled with the Creator's light. When he beckons you to dance, dance. And when he beckons you to sing, sing. And when he beckons you to love, love. As quietly and quickly as it appeared, the vision left, leaving the young Chicano who had just heard someone yell, "Hey, Spick!" Slowly the young Chicano turned to face his oppressors, but they drove away quickly. It wasn't just a smile, that kind smile that frightened them. It was the way his eyes glowed, the way they glowed as the sun rose behind him. That gets a little political, but...
That was really powerful, man.
Oh, I don't know what I'm doing here.
Hey, thank you so much for taking so much time out of your evening and away from your painting, your work, to talk with us this evening.
Sure.
How do people find you? How do they find your work?
Right now, the best way is through my website, which is StevonLucero.com. Check out the work there.
And they can purchase prints and books,
there's prints available. My book is available. The paintings, and on some of the paintings, the price is negotiable. I make deals for people all the time, so I don't have any plans for the future in terms of shows. I'm doing stuff, and like I said earlier, I have a big project coming, and if I survive it, I've got to make some decisions after that, as to whether I want to do anything else. Because if that works out well, I may have some opportunities. If not, it's okay. I still have the website, and people still contact me here and there, and that's it. If I end up doing anything else, we'll probably just announce. Arlette will probably announce it somehow. I don't know.
Okay.
So,
fantastic.
I hope I didn't bore you guys.
No, not at all.
It was fantastic.
Thank you so much.
Thank you so much for the opportunity to sit down with you. This was an awesome experience.
You didn't expect to go this long, did you?
No, that was awesome though.
I told you I talk too much. I don't know if you'll be able to use all that.
We'll make it a multi-part.
That's right. It's going to be like a six-parter.
No, that was fantastic.
I really enjoyed it.
Good.